Good morning. Canada needs to move quickly. We are not adequately vaccinated, and new variants are ravaging our country. Throughout April, dozens of COVID-positive flights have been landing in Canada. With them, they've brought the risk of new variants, including the double mutated variant that is currently overwhelming India's healthcare system. Nearly a third of all international flights landing in Toronto have had COVID on board. We have a small window of opportunity to act, and we must move now. Près d'un tiers des vols internationaux à l'aéroport de Toronto ont eu une personne atteinte de la COVID-19 à leur bord. Ils savent que la réduction de la mobilité aide à combattre la COVID-19. Chez nous, on doit agir maintenant. As soon as COVID-19 began to spread, Conservatives called on the Liberals to take action to secure the border and prevent the spread of the virus in Canada. I have been calling for tougher border measures to fight COVID-19 since March of 2020. Had they done this when we asked them to, we would have been in a better position today. Depuis près d'un an, les conservateurs demandent également des tests de dépistage rapides avant et après l'arrivée. Les libéraux ont mis ces mesures en place depuis un peu plus d'un mois seulement. The Liberal government has done next to nothing to keep dangerous variants from Brazil, South Africa, and the United Kingdom out of Canada. We now see daily case counts for each on the rise, and shifts in how the virus is impacting Canadians, like more young people getting sick as a result. I wish we could go back and fix the past, but we can only move forward. These known variants and newer variants we are still learning about, like the one ravaging India, are serious, and we need a plan to stop their spread now. La situation en Inde et au Brésil est très grave. Leurs hôpitaux manquent de respirateurs artificiels. Au Brésil, plus de la moitié des patients dans les unités de soins intensifs avaient moins de 40 ans. On demande aux femmes de repousser leur grossesse. Malheureusement, les nourrissons meurent. Le variant brésilien est déjà au Canada. Ce n'est plus le temps d'attendre. Nous devons agir pour empêcher que d'autres variants arrivent au Canada. Canadians are being told not to go to work, not to send their children to school, but hundreds of international flights continue to land in Canada each week. On dit aux Canadiens de ne pas aller travailler et de ne pas envoyer leurs enfants à l'école. Au même moment, des centaines de vols internationaux continuent d'atterrir au Canada. Comme toujours, le gouvernement Trudeau est lent à agir. Le gouvernement fédéral doit suspendre immédiatement et temporairement tous les vols des pays les plus touchés par la COVID-19. Nous devons agir pour empêcher les nouveaux variants d'entrer au Canada et de se propager. Nous devons agir pour nos frontières. It is long past time for Justin Trudeau to take action. The federal government must temporarily suspend flights from hotspot countries immediately. This will buy us time to develop a clear set of parameters for identifying the risks of emerging variants and sharing this information clearly with Canadians. Canadians deserve to know where COVID-19 is spreading, how emerging variants are changing transmission, and what vaccination levels are, both here and abroad. And they deserve to know this in real time. A temporary suspension of flights from hotspot countries will also give us time to implement enhanced screening and quarantine measures for people who have been in a variant hotspot or who have tested positive for a variant of concern. This will deter people from finding loopholes by flying into Canada through airports in non-hotspot areas. Flight bans are a reactive measure. This temporary suspension will allow us to become more nimble and proactive instead. But let me be clear. These new measures should be paired with the most aggressive plan possible to correct the Prime Minister's failure to procure vaccines. This virus is racing ahead of us, and we need to get vaccines to every Canadian who wants one as soon as possible. We need to move quickly to stop the new variants from entering Canada and spreading further. We must secure our borders. Merci beaucoup.
And now we'll be taking questions, starting with questions in the room and alternate between the room and the phone to sanitize the mic between questions. Quick reminder, as usual, one question and one follow-up. Nous allons maintenant prendre les questions, commençant par les questions dans la salle et alterner entre les questions de la salle et au téléphone pour bien désinfecter le micro entre les questions. Petit rappel, une question avec une question de suivi. Today, Mr. O'Toole will take 8 questions. Aujourd'hui, M. O'Toole prendra 8 questions. We will have the first question from the floor. Nous allons prendre la première question de la salle.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. You said hotspot nations temporarily suspend those flights. Could you sort of spell out what those nations are? And what about domestic travel? There are still COVID cases and variants circulating within the country.
Thank you, Kevin. The most important thing is to move quickly and stop flights temporarily from hotspot countries like India, like Brazil, where the new variants are out of control and at wide risk of spreading in their population, and without sufficient vaccination rates in those countries to prevent it. Our country doesn't have sufficient vaccination rates because Mr. Trudeau has been so slow to procure vaccines. So without those rates, that spread could come here, and the dangerous variant we're seeing in India has severe health risks that need to be stopped. We then need to analyze which countries people could travel to come to Canada indirectly, and have a series of measures, including rapid screening and testing and quarantining, to stop the variants from taking hold in Canada. But those two countries, at a bare minimum, would be the starting point.
So, Mr. O'Toole, as the Prime Minister, I think he would defend it this way, right, that there already are screening measures and quarantine measures, hotel quarantines for international travelers. Would you have any other ideas about, should those be stricter? Should there be a longer hotel quarantine? Is there, what could be done to improve or enhance the measures that are already at the borders?
Well, right now, there needs to be a stop, a cessation of flights from hotspot countries completely. Mr. Trudeau was 1 year late in setting up basic entry screening, rapid testing at airports. He said he was doing that for months at the early part of the pandemic and did not get it done. We then need to look at countries with high flight rates from those other countries so that people can't indirectly find a loophole to get into Canada if they have a high risk of spread. So we would like to see immediate action on key countries and then a much more public conversation about the risks because our population is not properly vaccinated and which variants that we need to have more restricted measures to keep out of Canada.
Opérateur, prochaine question. Operator, next question.
Hélène, vous êtes co-auteur d'information. Oui, bonjour, M. O'Toole. J'aimerais revenir au débat sur le projet de loi sur les thérapies de conversion, C6. La semaine dernière, votre député Tamara Jensen a parlé de unclean et lesbian activity qui peuvent être guéries par une thérapie. J'aimerais savoir, je sais qu'elle s'est excusée, mais que pensez-vous de ces propos? Êtes-vous confortable qu'elle soit dans votre caucus?
Hélène, comme vous le savez, je m'oppose à la thérapie de conversion et je vais voter de bannir ce practice. C'est injuste et j'ai dit ça dans un discours au début de ce projet de loi.
Oui, vous n'avez pas répondu à ma question, ce que vous pensiez des propos de votre député. J'aimerais quand même vous amener sur un autre sujet, sur la taxe sur le carbone. Les libéraux, dans leur budget, proposent de transformer le remboursement en chèque que les citoyens recevront. Dans quelle mesure ça va rendre plus difficile pour vous, votre désir d'abolir la taxe, puisque les gens vont voir qu'est-ce qu'ils vont perdre?
J'ai annoncé notre plan sur les changements climatiques. C'est un plan sérieux, sans une taxe spécifique sur le carbone, mais avec une tarification et un niveau, un tiers de la tarification, le prix de M. Trudeau, notre plan est meilleur pour la croissance économique, pour les emplois, pour les investissements. Et après la pandémie, on a besoin d'une relance économique à travers le pays et d'avoir un plan de réduire les émissions. Je suis fier de notre plan. C'est meilleur que le plan de M. Trudeau. Et je vais parler avec les Canadiens sur notre plan avant l'élection.
In English, please.
I'm proud of our plan that is modeled to show that we will meet our Paris targets, we will reduce emissions, but we will have much stronger economic growth, jobs and investments than Mr. Trudeau's plan. He has never met any of his targets and is now just raising his tax more and more and more. Canadians deserve a plan that will get emissions down without disrupting our economy, particularly after COVID-19. We've got a lot of work to do to get our economy back on track.
We'll take the next question from the floor. On prend la prochaine question de la salle.
Good morning, Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. Just wondering if you could expand a little on what extra measures you'd like to see at the border. The United Kingdom, for example, has a 10-day quarantine in a hotel. We only have 3. Would you be open to extending that? Or what other measures do you think would help keep the variants from flourishing in Canada?
Thank you, Mia. The first thing we're asking for today is particular hotspot countries with new variants that appear high risk and aren't fully understood. Those flights need to be stopped completely. That will be a temporary measure so that we can put in place the right appropriate balance of stopping flights, screening, and quarantining. The more serious the risk, the more serious the action needs to be. And it needs to be immediate, because we see other countries that don't have sufficient levels of vaccination, like Brazil, like India, are watching these variants get out of control. Mr. Trudeau's failure on vaccines means we are like countries like that because we don't have a sufficient level of vaccination in our population, and we are very exposed to variants. So stop the flights immediately and then make sure there's enhanced measures for any of these hotspot countries.
I'm also wondering if you can comment on the increased targets that the Liberals are releasing today for emissions, and whether your plan would commit to meeting those increased targets as well.
First, Mr. Trudeau has never made a target as Prime Minister on any level. He's never made a climate change target. He's never made a target on his pledge for deficits. He's never made his pledge on boil water advisory on reserves. Canadians cannot trust Mr. Trudeau. Our plan for climate change will meet our Paris targets, our international commitment, and will do so in a way that minimizes the impact on our economy, actually has better jobs and investment outcomes. That's what Canadians deserve, not more empty words from Mr. Trudeau, not an announcement without a plan. That is his MO as Prime Minister. Shiny announcements, zero delivering. Canadians can expect a Prime Minister with a Conservative government that will deliver on its targets, whether on climate change or on economic growth.
Puisqu'il n'y a plus de questions dans la salle, nous allons passer au téléphone pour les prochaines questions. Since there are no more questions in the room, we'll go to the phone for the next question. Operator, next question. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Geneviève Normand, CDC Radio-Canada. Oui, bonjour. En fait, je vous ai fait entendre toujours en français sur la question des variantes. C'est quoi spécifique en termes de pays de là où on devrait cesser les vols internationaux au Canada?
Merci. On doit arrêter les vols entre Brésil et l'Inde, par exemple, parce qu'il y a des risques sévères avec les variants là-bas. Il n'y a pas un niveau de vaccination suffisant dans les pays comme ça. C'est la même chose avec notre pays, malheureusement. Grâce à l'élection de M. Trudeau, on n'a pas un niveau de vaccination suffisant d'arrêter la propagation des variants. C'est pourquoi je viens d'annoncer notre plan d'arrêter les vols internationaux avec les pays les plus touchés par les variants et d'avoir les autres mesures pour une approche sécuritaire.
Et aussi, en question de relance, je reviens moi aussi sur la question des cibles environnementales. On a maintenant une fourchette de 40 à 45 de réduction d'ici 2030 en comparaison au niveau de 2005. Votre réaction à ça, est-ce que c'est insuffisant? Est-ce que c'est trop ambitieux?
Il n'y a pas un plan avec M. Trudeau. Une autre annonce, des belles paroles encore sur l'environnement. C'est comme les autres enjeux avec le Premier ministre Trudeau. Pas beaucoup de belles paroles, pas d'action. Il n'a jamais livré les marchandises, incluant avec les changements climatiques. On a lancé une politique spécifique sur les changements climatiques. On va réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre, mais on va créer des emplois et des investissements pour notre pays. Et on a besoin de la croissance économique après la pandémie, sans une augmentation de taxes comme M. Trudeau.
Operator, next question. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Marc-André Cossette, Global News.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Thanks for taking our questions. Just on Canada's efforts to curb its greenhouse gas emissions, your party's plan is targeting a 30% reduction in line with the Paris Agreement. As you heard, the Prime Minister is now promising a 41% reduction by 2030. So just wondering, will your party match that commitment? And if not, why not?
Our party will meet our Paris commitments, and we've launched a plan to do that while having job growth and investment in Canada vastly superior to Mr. Trudeau's plan. Let's be clear with Canadians. Mr. Trudeau has never met a climate target. He has never met a target he's promised Canadians on the economy with deficits or on Indigenous issues for boil water advisories. Mr. Trudeau is the Prime Minister who is an expert in announcements and gets a 0 on delivery. He fails every single time. And my announcement today about the spread of variants is a result of his failure on delivering vaccines. Countries that have appropriate levels of vaccination aren't at such severe risks to these new variants. So Canadians will start judging Mr. Trudeau knowing his track record of failing to deliver.
And as a follow-up just on border measures, what do you make of those reports of people who are walking across the land border in an effort to avoid quarantine hotels, as well as others who are not following quarantine rules that are in place?
This is why the reactive measure of stopping flights from hotspot countries allows us time to have a plan to set up a system to stop loopholes, whether it's someone flying from a hotspot country into another into Canada, whether it's using a land crossing. We have to make sure that we stop the risk of these dangerous variants getting into Canada or getting further into Canada while our vaccination levels are so low. Only 2% of our population has been fully vaccinated. We are exposed because of Mr. Trudeau's failure to deliver vaccines. And some of the reports out of India with the double mutated variant are very, very alarming. So we need to take immediate measures. I'm asking the Prime Minister to take action. Don't be slow this time. We've got a small window of opportunity to act to keep Canadians safe. So let's act.
Operator, next question. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Marie Zastel, Le Devoir.
Oui, bonjour. J'aimerais revenir sur la première question de mon collègue de Global sur les nouvelles cibles en environnement. J'en comprends donc que vous n'avez pas l'ambition d'atteindre des cibles de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 40 à 45 mais qu'est-ce que vous répondez aux gens qui disent que votre plan climatique présenté la semaine dernière est donc déjà passé date parce que votre cible n'est déjà plus d'actualité avec ce qui se fait à l'international? Est-ce que, dans le fond, votre plan n'a pas été présenté un peu pour rien si les cibles ne sont pas aussi ambitieuses que celles des autres?
Les cibles de Paris ne sont pas passées date. Et en fait, M. Trudeau, il n'a pas un plan de mettre les objectifs de Paris maintenant. Une autre annonce par le Premier ministre, mais une autre annonce sans un plan. On a annoncé un plan spécifique pour les changements climatiques. On va atteindre nos objectifs et les cibles de Paris, mais en même temps créer des emplois pour les Canadiens après la pandémie. On doit ciblé sur une relance économique à travers le pays après la pandémie et en même temps réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Je suis fier de notre plan. C'est meilleur que le plan de M. Trudeau et peut-être c'est pourquoi il vient d'inventer un nouveau plan. Mais je vais voir les détails.
Merci. Sur un autre sujet, vous faites toute une conférence de presse aujourd'hui pour dénoncer qu'on soit dans une troisième vague de la pandémie, demander qu'on cesse les vols internationaux à cause des variants. Vous faites tout un point de presse sur le danger de la pandémie, mais vous êtes dans un hôtel où vous avez invité les médias alors qu'il est interdit en Ontario de faire des rassemblements à l'intérieur. Comment est-ce que vous justifiez ça, cette espèce de contradiction entre votre annonce et le contexte de votre annonce, alors que vous enfreignez les règles sanitaires?
Nous suivrons les règles sanitaires chaque fois et c'est le cas avec notre studio. On doit être prêt pour une élection en pleine d'une pandémie parce que c'est le plan de M. Trudeau. Et avec le studio, on va avoir des annonces, des réunions par Zoom avec les Canadiens et Canadiennes, tout en respectant les mesures sanitaires.
Operator, next question. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Mary Kay Walsh, Globe and Mail.
Hi, thanks so much for taking our questions. I just want to go back to the question that my colleagues are trying to get you to answer, but you are so far not directly answering. On the new climate targets, does your party also commit to reducing the emissions from Canada between 40 and 45% below 2005 levels within the decade?
We will meet our Paris targets, period. We will not make up new policy on the fly.
Target,
we will not make up things on the fly like Mr. Trudeau did just today. Why did he make this up today? Because we launched a plan that is vastly better than his. It will make our Paris targets. That's the commitment Canada has signed on to, while minimizing disruption on the economy. Canadians can't afford higher and higher taxes. They can't afford to wipe out sections of our economy. That seems to be Mr. Trudeau's plan. Raise taxes and transition Canadians out of their jobs. I will not do that. We have a plan to make our Paris commitment. That is what we're committing to, America, and focus on getting people back to work. That's what Canadians want.
And what is the Paris target then?
It's the 30% target, and it's the target that Mr. Trudeau has never come close to meeting. I'd like Canadians to take a good look at Mr. Trudeau. He has never made a commitment he's given to Canadians, whether it's never running a deficit under $10 billion, whether it's ending boil water advisories on reserves, whether it's a commitment to transparency, to never having an omnibus bill. We just had our first budget after 2 years. Canadians deserve better. They deserve a government that's ethical, that gives a plan that's clear, and takes action like we are today to keep Canadians safe by stopping flights from hotspot countries. So I'm very happy to judge my record on deliverology compared to Mr. Trudeau's.
Operator, last question. Opérateur, dernière question.
Andrew Lawton, True North.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. NDP Member of Parliament Matthew Green has said that some public officials have engaged in what he called, quote, criminal negligence, unquote, with regard to responding to the pandemic. And he went further to say that Canada should have a Washington-style commission into the handling of it. And I was wondering if that was something you would support, a post-mortem look at how politicians and public health advisors responded to this.
Well, I've been holding Mr. Trudeau to account for his lack of urgent response to COVID-19 with the border a year ago and now the border again with new variants, on rapid testing where we were months behind other countries, and on vaccines where he first partnered with China. That failed, and now we're months behind other countries. I've already announced that we would have a public inquiry immediately to learn the lessons of where the ball has been dropped in this pandemic. But I've also asked for a monitor to be appointed now so that in real time we can improve. So I'm taking the frustrations all Canadians have. We hate seeing the lockdowns. We hate seeing our loved ones kept from us. We need to do better. That's why we've launched a plan to recover our economy, to be more prepared and to hold the response to account, and we will do that in government.
Since 2015, the Conservatives have called Justin Trudeau's so-called price on carbon a carbon tax. The implication being that if Canadians are forced because of the government to pay more for a product, it's a tax. With regard to your climate change plan, do you concede that you are in fact allowing there to be a carbon tax? And if not, how can you not make that with what Conservatives have been saying about Trudeau's price on carbon for the last 6 years?
I put forward a plan last week that will end Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax and put forward a plan that puts consumers, Canadians, small business owners, farmers in the driver's seat. And the fact that not one penny of the price on carbon goes to Ottawa makes it not a tax. We've had some people say, when you pay a deposit on a bottle and get the deposit back when you recycle the bottle, that environmental levy, that would probably be the closest comparison to this, because consumers are not giving an increasing amount of money away to Ottawa. Mr. Trudeau today is likely doubling his tax yet again to make new targets he's making up on the fly. So what we've said is Canadians deserve to know what their carbon footprint is, the price on carbon, which is a change, Andrew, yes, but that will be kept with them, and then they will be in the driver's seat with respect to lowering that carbon footprint over time. Our plan is modeled to meet our Paris targets, but more excitingly, to have stronger jobs and investment, and that's what we need after the COVID crisis.
This is all the time we have. C'est tout le temps que nous avions. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.